Now, for more on China's economy, let's bring in Arthur Dong, teaching professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Always good to have you on.
Thank you for having me on, Rachelle.
So first, I'd like to have you break down the latest private report from the services sector showing that growth for July. What's driving that expansion?
Well, that's a very encouraging number, and the Caixin study is always a highly reliable number. What it indicates is this is a normal sort of a pattern that as China, becomes perhaps has a little bit of a challenge on the manufacturing side, it's being replaced by an increase in the services side or the services sector of its economy. So this is part of a natural rebalancing of its economy as more and more service sector employment and opportunity starts to displace the manufacturing sector, and this is what you normally want to see in a developing economy. In terms of the services, I didn't see exactly what the breakdown was in terms of the sectors that were the real contributors to this growth, but I suspect it would probably be like things like personal services, as people feel more comfortable to go out and visit hair salons and visit restaurants in the entertainment and hospitality area. And so I think these are perhaps many of the drivers that are driving the increase in these numbers.
And as you mentioned, that balance between services and manufacturing, we did see that a survey out at the start of the week shows that manufacturing did slow last month. What's happening with this sector, and is that something to be concerned about?
Well, there was so much robust demand in the earlier part of this year for all the kinds of products that China is good at manufacturing at, meaning like things like furniture, household goods, consumer electronics. I mean, the world, as a result of COVID, was locked down and isolated in their homes, increasing at least on a temporary basis global demand for many of these products. And once these products and things were purchased, you're going to start to see a tapering of demand for these products as a bit of normalcy starts to return. At this point, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I just think it's a temporary pause.
Now, obviously, we're in the middle of the summer travel season in China, as are a lot of different parts of the world. But what impact has the Delta variant had so far on domestic travel plans?
Well, here in the United States, it certainly has not seemed to have slowed, travel. Matter of fact, the American airlines and air carriers are all reporting record numbers to the point that they have to cancel flights because they don't have enough pilots and crew. And in China, there has been a significant slowdown in tourism and travel, as I think Chinese citizens would rather stay closer to home rather than venture outside of China due to fears of COVID. So COVID is still having an influence in how people behave and where they're choosing to spend their travel dollars.
So then, given the lessons learned from the initial outbreak and the closures and the losses that followed, how concerned are tourism-related businesses about the length of this current shutdown?
I think they're very concerned. So if you look at tourism, hotels, and hospitality, I think across the board, they have not restored to normalcy yet. Many countries outside of China, in the regions that surround China, such as Hong Kong and Singapore and Japan, they all have restrictions in terms of having to quarantine, as well as, full evidence that you are free of COVID and vaccinated. Those rules have not lifted, and even the sort of sandbox experiment that was carried out in Thailand and Phuket, that seems not have gained a lot of traction as of late, and there are also spiking cases of COVID in Phuket. So this has people worried and a little bit more reserved with regard to how far they want to travel from home.
So then, beyond tourism then, what impact might the Delta variant have on China's broader economic growth across the board?
I think that is the big question and the big risk that's facing the global economy right now. In the United States, we're seeing an outbreak of the more deadly variety, which is the Delta variant, and it's spreading very, very fast and rapidly, particularly in those portions of America in the South where there's been a high degree of resistance to obtaining the vaccine. And this has, public health officials as well as the Biden administration incredibly worried. And so we're worried about the boomerang effect of a revisiting of COVID and thus having to take more lockdown procedures as we did earlier this year. And that would certainly crimp the global economy, and certainly China would not be immune to the effects of that as well.
So then, just very quickly then, what other data are you keeping an eye out for China this month?
The date I'd be keeping an eye out is the beginning of September, when schools and many companies start to recall their workers. It's already been anticipated that many companies are going to have already issued orders to their employees that they expect to see them in the office beginning September 1st. And here in America, both universities, elementary schools, K to 12, they pretty much will all be in-person instruction. And so as a result of that, that resumption of normal patterns of both work and education and people's lives, that's going to have an impact on demand. And that's certainly going to fortify, the global economy. So we're going to see that across the board in Europe and the United States as well. And the only thing that may sort of crimp that is sort of a rise or a resurrection of COVID.
We'll all certainly be keeping an eye on that. Thank you, as always, Arthur Dong there, teaching professor at the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown University.